Long ago, before the stars were full of life and before the galaxies were connected by trade and travel, there was a time when the universe was ruled by the elders. These were ancient civilizations, old, wise, and powerful. They had seen things no one else had. They had explored black holes, walked on gas giants, and even touched the edges of time itself. Among these elder species, one name was remembered with fear, the name of a planet, a species that had once nearly brought ruin not just to one world, but to the idea of peace in the stars. That name was humans. But as centuries passed, the elders grew quiet. Some disappeared, some chose isolation, and some simply faded. Their warnings, once written in glowing symbols and carved into crystal walls, were left behind like forgotten stories. One such warning lay deep within the archives of the Valari people, a race known for their beauty, order, and strong sense of balance. On their homeworld, deep in a mountain that hummed with ancient energy, was a small room called Jakrathul, meaning memory of fear. Inside that room, recorded in their ancient language, was a message passed from one generation to another. It said, "If you ever see fire coming from a blue planet, leave. If you ever hear music without rules, run. If you ever meet creatures called humans, do not talk, do not wait, do not fight, just vanish." But time is cruel. What is terrifying today becomes a myth tomorrow. The young Valari scientists of the New Age, more curious, more confident, began to question the legends. Their modern technology had mapped thousands of species. They had created peaceful relations with countless worlds. No species had ever come close to their level of diplomacy. The humans? No one had even seen them. The star system called Sol, where Earth existed, was marked as unobserved danger in their star charts. But it had been thousands of years since the warning. Surely now, everything had changed. On the Council of Thought, where Valari leaders met to decide the fate of their people, a debate began. The signal had come in silence, just a tiny whisper, an ancient Earth song carried on a long-distance radio wave. The music was messy, full of instruments crashing into each other, emotions screaming through voices, and something wild in the rhythm. It was Beethoven, lost in deep space. Young minds on the council, like Kale, an expert in sound biology, were fascinated. He played the music over and over in private chambers, trying to understand what kind of species could put rage, peace, joy, and grief into one single piece. It wasn't logical. It wasn't balanced. It was human. Kale grew obsessed. He wanted to know more. He believed the humans were no longer a threat. He thought perhaps the elders were wrong, or that humans had evolved. After all, wasn't that what all species did? Learn, grow, change? Others weren't so sure. Commander Gerak, a decorated officer of Valari's silent fleet, had read the archives carefully. He didn't trust forgotten warnings. He had seen how curiosity could become poison. But even he couldn't deny that their people had become too cautious, too afraid of shadows. So, after long debate, and under strict silence, the council approved. A small mission. No contact, no messages, just silent observation from far away. A small stealth ship, Saloon, would travel to Earth's orbit, study their transmissions, record data, and return. That was it. It was meant to be simple. No interaction, no risk. The Solune launched under starlight, cloaked so deeply in space energy that even light refused to bounce off it. It carried a crew of just 15 Valari, scientists, observers, and Gerak himself. The journey was smooth, passing stars that danced like fireflies and comets that whispered to each other. As they approached the Sol system, they saw Earth for the first time. A small planet, blue, covered in clouds, water, and life. It didn't look dangerous. It looked beautiful. From orbit, the crew began scanning. Earth's satellites were everywhere. Billions of humans moved below, working, playing, laughing, crying. They were at war in some places, and in others they were saving lives. They were shouting in streets and singing in churches. They were strange, complex, Both. Broken and brilliant. Cale couldn't stop watching. He downloaded human broadcasts from old movies to real-time news. He saw pain, hope, anger, and dreams. The humans were not perfect. They made mistakes, but they were trying. He began to doubt the old legends even more. They weren't monsters. They were just human. But Jarak stayed cold. He ordered silence. No signals, no pings. We are not gods. We are watchers. That's all. Still, something stirred in the hearts of the crew. Even the coldest officers found themselves affected. The humans had poetry that made no sense but made the heart ache. They had pictures of far-off galaxies they dreamed of reaching. They had stories about aliens, not as enemies, but as friends. The crew had come expecting beasts. What they found were beings full of wonder. Cale stood near the viewing deck watching a city blink below them, with light spreading like veins across a dark land. He whispered, "They want to reach the stars, and just like we did." Jarak responded, "And if they do, will they reach with peace or with fire?" No one had an answer, but Cale couldn't let go. Deep inside him, something was pulling. Curiosity is like gravity. It pulls harder the closer you are. He requested permission to launch a tiny drone, a probe no bigger than a fruit, designed to blend with space junk. It wouldn't enter the atmosphere. It would just listen to satellite signals and return. Jarak said no. But Cale waited until the commander was in rest state. He activated the probe, launched it silently, and sent it toward low orbit. He believed he was right. He believed the humans were peaceful, that the elders were wrong. The drone entered Earth's low orbit. It blended with old space junk, pieces of old rockets, dead satellites, broken metal pieces floating since the 1990s. No one on Earth noticed. For the first few hours, it moved smoothly. It scanned Wi-Fi, downloaded satellite TV, and recorded thousands of signals. It wasn't seen until someone did see it. A group of human amateur astronomers in a small observatory in Australia noticed something strange. A moving object that didn't match any known satellite path. It didn't respond to Earth's tracking systems. It didn't have a name. They posted the video online. UFO, the caption said. Within hours it went viral. People debated. Some laughed, some panicked, some believed. The Valari ship watched in silence as the humans reacted. At first it was just noise, but then governments got involved. The US and China both noticed the object. They began scanning for it. Their systems, though not as advanced as Valari tech, began adjusting. Jarak was furious. "You've exposed us," he shouted at Cale. "You've done what the elders warned about," Cale tried to explain. "It wasn't an attack. They noticed so fast because they're smart, curious, like us." But Jarak had no patience for that. "They're not like us. We warned ourselves for a reason," the crew argued. Some sided with Cale, some with Jarak, but none of them could deny what was now happening. The humans were looking up, not with fear, not with weapons, not yet, but with questions, with wonder, just like Cale had when he first heard that Earth song. The problem wasn't that humans were monsters. The problem was they were mirrors. They reflected everything you gave them: fear, kindness, violence, hope, and when you showed them a mystery, they chased it. The first part of the journey that was supposed to be silent had ended in noise. The elders had warned the Valari, "Do not approach the species that cannot ignore the unknown." Because the real danger of humans wasn't just what they were, it was what they could become, once they knew you were watching. And now, they knew. The Valari ship Solune remained silent, hidden just beyond the reach of Earth's satellites. Its surface shimmered with cloaking energy, blending with the black canvas of space. Earth rotated below, full of life, unaware that eyes from a different world were watching every move, every signal, every breath of the planet. Commander Jarak stood on the main deck watching the data screen. He was a strict leader, strong, experienced, and cold in his decisions. What had happened with Cale's secret drone had shaken him deeply. He had already sent a silent report to the Valari High Council, informing them that the observation mission was at risk of exposure. But he hadn't received a response yet. That silence worried him even more. Kyle, on the other hand, was restless. Ever since the drone began returning signals, he had locked himself in his private chamber, downloading, translating, and organizing the vast collection of human data. Their art, their history, their tragedies, their dreams. It was all there, flowing like rivers through the digital air. He had expected something interesting, but what he found was far more than that. He found emotion, depth, something painfully familiar. Humans were not simple. They weren't just intelligent. They were alive in ways Cale had never imagined. They danced in the rain, cried in their cars, painted walls with their emotions, and built songs from sorrow. Their languages carried pain in the most poetic ways. Their stories were broken, but brave. Cale watched a human documentary called The Pale Blue Dot, a short film based on a photograph taken from the edge of the solar system. A human named Carl Sagan had spoken in it, softly, thoughtfully. He called Earth a tiny mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. That moment struck Kyle so hard he stopped breathing for seconds. How could a species warned to be violent and chaotic also be capable of such delicate wisdom? Jirak knew what Cale was feeling, and he didn't like it. He remembered the stories. The elders had warned them not because humans attacked them, but because humans were unpredictable. They didn't act like other species. They didn't respect patterns. They broke rules of behavior, and their intelligence grew at a dangerous speed. Jirak believed Cale was losing his objectivity, but Cale believed Jirak was stuck in the past. Meanwhile, the humans below were becoming more curious. The video shared by the Australian Observatory was still spreading. Scientists on Earth were now adjusting telescopes, trying to locate the unidentified object again. Many thought it was just space junk or a satellite glitch, but some believed it was more. A few even said out loud what others were thinking quietly. We're being watched. Inside Saloon, the crew grew tense. The mission was meant to be quiet, safe, and clean. Now it was unpredictable. Jirak called a private meeting with the senior officers and presented a hard choice. "We finish the scans tonight and leave," he said. "No further risk." But Cale disagreed. He had found something deep in the human signals. An encrypted radio wave buried in their older military transmissions. It was a rescue signal, a repeating call for help from a submarine lost decades ago, still broadcasting from the ocean floor, as if the humans didn't want to forget. That signal hadn't been shut off. Cale believed it wasn't an accident. It was a message. We don't give up. To Cale, this symbolized everything about humanity. They remembered even their failures. They didn't bury them. They sang about them, wrote books about them, laughed about them. That, he thought, was strength. Jirak didn't want to hear it. "You're falling under their spell," he said coldly. "You think they're beautiful, but beauty can be dangerous." Cale replied, "Then why does it scare you?" Jirak turned away. He had seen enough of what curiosity could cost. Years ago, his own brother had died during an exploration mission on a distant world where the native species had smiled first and then stabbed second. That pain never left him. But now the saloon faced a difficult decision. Leave quietly or stay and risk detection? As night passed over Earth, something unexpected happened. A single telescope, belonging to a private space company, picked up a strange flicker. It wasn't light. It was something else, something the computer called a pattern distortion. The humans didn't know it, but they had just brushed against the edge of Saloon's cloaking field. Not enough to identify it, but enough to confirm that something was there. The humans didn't panic. They investigated. Within 4 hours, they had redirected a small satellite, just enough to sweep that section of space again. This was not the act of a scared species. This was the act of a curious one. Jirak was shocked. "They shouldn't have this kind of precision," he said. "Their tech is 50 years behind ours." Kyle shook his head. They're behind us, but not blind. The human satellite made another pass. Still nothing. But the message was clear. We noticed you. That moment changed everything on the Solune. The illusion of safety was broken. The cloak still held. But how long before the humans really saw through it? How long before they built something to scan? Deeper? The Valari crew debated through the night. Some said to leave immediately. Others said to stay and continue learning. Kyle said nothing for a long time. But then he spoke to the whole crew. If we leave now, we will leave with fear. If we stay, maybe we will leave with understanding. Jarek stood, cold and firm. If we stay, we may not leave at all. But secretly, Jarek felt something strange too. Something he didn't want to admit. When he watched Earth, saw the glowing cities, the music drifting up into the stars, the images of children dreaming about space, he felt something unfamiliar. He felt possibility. The humans had war, but they also had wonder. They had weapons. But they also had songs that could make even a warship pause. He didn't trust them, but he couldn't ignore them either. Later that night, Cale watched an old Earth film, Interstellar. He watched the human characters cry, risk their lives for each other, and travel through time for love. These weren't villains, these weren't monsters, these were dreamers. He asked himself quietly, what if the elders were right? And wrong? The warning had been about danger, yes, but maybe the danger wasn't war. Maybe the real danger was what humans awakened in others. The crew of Saloon wasn't supposed to feel anything, but now they were feeling everything. The planet below them was pulling at their minds like a magnet. Not with force, but with stories, with feelings. With something Valari minds weren't trained to handle. It was curiosity. The very thing they had feared in humans was now rising in them too. As the Solony continued its orbit, silently watching, the humans prepared to send another signal. Not a weapon, not a warning, just a sound, a binary pulse. Short, then long. A pattern. It wasn't random. It was communication. The humans had noticed, and now they were whispering back. Jarek stared at the screen, and for the first time in years he was afraid, not because of what the humans might do, but because he realized they were exactly like the Valari. Curious, defiant, and unbreakably alive. The old warning echoed in his mind one last time. If you meet the humans, do not fight, do not talk, just vanish. But now, they couldn't vanish. Because the humans had seen them, and curiosity was awake on both sides of the sky. The Earth spun below like a glowing jewel in the dark sea of space, peaceful on the surface but filled with noise, movement, and thought. The Valari ship Soluna remained invisible in orbit, wrapped in silence, but inside, everything was changing. What was supposed to be a quiet observation mission had become something else, something no one had planned for. The crew no longer looked at Earth like a project. They looked at it the way one looks at a mirror that shows more than just your reflection. Every sound, every signal, every story coming from that small blue planet was digging into them. And now it wasn't just Cale who felt it. Others did too. Jarek had called for a final vote. It was time to decide, return to Valari space with what they had, or stay longer and risk contact. The vote was tense. For some, the warnings of the elders still held weight. For others, the fear had become curiosity too strong to ignore. When the results came in, it was close. They chose to stay. Just 3 more days, that's all. Long enough to collect deeper cultural data, finish the language translation logs, and then quietly leave. Jarek agreed, but under one condition. No communication. No drones, no signals. They would leave no fingerprint behind. But humans had other plans. On Earth, the strange object, what they had started calling the silent visitor, had become a global mystery. It was being talked about on TV, in universities, on social media. News channels argued whether it was a new satellite, a secret military project, or the first proof of alien life. But then came the turning point. A small group of international scientists decided to do something different. Instead of scanning for the object again, they sent a message. Simple. Elegant. Just a binary code repeating prime numbers, a sign of intelligent life. Then they added something more. A recording of a human voice saying hello in over 30 languages, along with the image of a human being and the coordinates of Earth's location. It was peaceful, humble, and terrifying. Inside the saloon, the message appeared on their signal intercept panel. At first the crew didn't believe it, then they played it. The voice of a child saying hello in English echoed through the chamber. It was a greeting and an invitation. Kale stared at the screen. They know we're watching. They're talking to the stars like we're part of them. Jarak's expression tightened. They're testing how close we are. If we answer, everything changes. Silence fell in the room, but it was already too late for silence. Because the Solune was not the only one listening. Back on Valari, the High Council had received Jarak's earlier emergency report. After long debate, they sent back a new order. Abort the mission immediately and return. The Council believed the risk of exposure had reached unacceptable levels. Jarak wanted to obey, but Kale refused to leave. He believed this moment was rare, one of those points in history where choices become stories, and stories become the turning point of civilizations. He begged Jarak for a chance. Just one message, he said. Not to show our power, just to show we're not afraid. Jarak was firm. Our fear protects us. The elders feared for a reason. But then something happened that no one expected. The human message changed. On the second day, Earth's transmission added music. Not just any music. A symphony. It was Beethoven's Ode to Joy. A piece once played when walls fell, when countries reunited, when peace seemed possible. They sent that music into space, letting it rise into the sky like a hand reaching out. Kyle couldn't take it anymore. He broke into the comms chamber. He didn't send a full reply, just a pulse. A single frequency, repeating the same prime. Numbers the humans had used. A reply. Short, clean, but unmistakable. Jarak arrived too late. He saw the light blink on the control panel and realized what had been done. Do you understand what you've done? He said. Kale stood silently. Told them they're not alone, he replied. For a long moment, Jarak said nothing. Then, to everyone's surprise, he didn't punish Kale. He simply walked out. The humans received the pulse 21 minutes later, and all over the planet, celebration erupted. The world changed that day. Every news channel on Earth called it proof of extraterrestrial intelligence. Politicians gave speeches. Scientists wept on live broadcasts. For once, people didn't argue. They were united, not by fear, but by awe. The humans began sending more signals. They sent poetry, photographs of children, paintings, radio shows, and even the sound of ocean waves. They were no longer asking if someone was out there. They knew, and they wanted to share what it meant to be human. Jarak watched these signals in silence. At first, he stayed cold. But one night, alone in the observation deck, he played a human video called Earthrise, an old recording from a time when humans first saw their world from space. The voice in the video said, "We came all this way to discover the moon, and what we really discovered was Earth." Jarak's heart, once like iron, softened just a little. What if the elders weren't warning them to protect the Valari from humans? What if they were warning the Valari from becoming too much like them, feeling too deeply, dreaming too wildly, hoping too loudly? Because once you start doing that, you can't go back to being only silent watchers. You become part of the story. By the third day, the Valari ship had collected more cultural information than ever imagined. More than any species had shared willingly and without fear. The mission was complete. Jarak stood before the crew. "We came to observe," he said. "But now we've been seen, so we must go. Not in fear, not in shame, but with respect." The saloon began preparing to leave Earth's orbit. Kyle stood, once more at the viewing window, watching the lights of the human cities flicker like stars on the ground. He whispered to himself, "They reached for the unknown. And they found us." And just as the Solune turned its ship to leave, something even stranger happened. A small private space agency in the United States launched a tiny probe, made from scrap parts, held together by hope more than science. It carried one thing only, a screen. And on that screen was a single message in every known human language. "We hope to meet you someday, not as enemies, not as gods, but as friends." The Volari didn't reply. Not yet, but they took the message with them. And as the ship entered the jump field and disappeared into space, Kyle knew something had changed, not just for humans, but for the galaxy. Because curiosity had broken the silence. And now 2 species who were never meant to meet had heard each other's voice, and neither would ever forget it. The elders warned them about humans, but curiosity drowned the warnings. Part 4. Explained in 2,500 words, simple English, interesting Urdu English storytelling style. When the Solune jumped back into Volari space, the crew expected silence. They thought they were returning home with history stored in their data cores and a mistake tucked away in memory. But what awaited them was not silence. It was shock. The Volari High Council had already received reports from deep scanners placed near Earth's orbit. Those scanners picked up the humans' reply signals and even the pulse Kale had sent. The Council was furious. Contact, even indirect, was strictly forbidden. Jarak stood in front of the Council alone as the rest of the crew waited in isolation chambers. The elder members sat high on their crystal thrones, their faces calm but cold. "You ignored the warnings," one of them said. Jarak replied calmly. "The warnings were based on fear, not understanding." Another counselor leaned forward. "The humans now know. What will they do next? Have they armed themselves?" Jarak shook his head. "No. They sang to us. They shared their pain, their art, their hope." The council chamber fell into silence. Kyle was called in next. Younger than Jarak, less restrained but more passionate. When they asked him why he sent the pulse, he didn't apologize. "I wanted them to know that someone was listening," he said. "They spoke to the sky with kindness. That should never go unanswered." The council didn't banish them. Not yet. But they grounded the crew of Solune. No further missions. No exploration. Observation teams were put on pause. In the following months, Volari society began to split. Some argued the humans were dangerous, unpredictable, exactly like the elders feared. They evolved quickly. They built weapons, crossed oceans, and made machines that reached beyond their solar system. Others disagreed. They said humanity was the mirror the Volari needed, that their emotions, stories, and hunger for connection revealed something beautiful, something worth learning from. And slowly, in the shadows of Volari cities, human culture began to spread, illegally. Downloaded Earth signals became black market treasures. Young Volari artists recreated human music. Some scientists even started learning human languages. The underground movement had a name: Echoes of Earth. Kale became a symbol of this hidden revolution. He started giving private lectures using human art to explain emotion. He spoke of the little boy's voice in the first hello message, of the music that made even a warship feel, of the final probe carrying nothing but a peaceful message. His words began to reach even the coldest minds. Even Jarak, once full of caution, now visited Kale secretly to talk, not as commander to officer but as friend to friend. Then one day, a new message came. From Earth. The humans had done something unexpected. They had built a second probe, much larger than the first. This time it carried more than greetings. It carried questions. It asked, "Who are you?" It asked, "Are you afraid of us?" It asked, "Do you feel like we do?" And at the end of the message was a simple human quote from a poet. "There are no strangers in the universe, only friends we haven't met yet." This new signal caused chaos on Volari. The council tried to block it from spreading, but it was too late. Valari youth began printing the message in glowing ink on their clothing. Artists painted the quote on sky bridges. Quiet protests began, where Valari stood in public squares with signs that said, "We feel like they do." The council panicked. They called emergency meetings, debated new bans, even considered deleting Earth from all systems to erase the influence. Jarak watched all of this unfold with a heavy heart. He had spent decades following the rules, respecting the elders, believing the silence was sacred. But now, he felt torn. Were they truly protecting their people from danger, or were they protecting themselves from change? Late one night, Kale invited Jarak to a secret event. A group of Valari had recreated an ancient human orchestra performance. The room was dark, lit only by soft blue lights, and a holographic conductor raised his hand. Then the music began. It was adagio for strings, soft, slow, full of sadness and beauty. As the notes filled the air, Jarak felt something he couldn't name. A memory of his brother, a time before he closed his heart, a feeling of belonging to something bigger than his own species. He left the room quietly. And then, he made a decision. Jarak sent a private message to an old contact in the Valari shipyards. He asked for a small exploration vessel, not for war, not for study, but for return to Earth. The council found out, of course. They tried to stop him, but Jarak wasn't the only one who felt this way anymore. When he arrived at the launch pad, there were over 1,000 Valari citizens waiting, not to block him, but to support him. Silent, united. The ship, named Luma, lifted into the sky like a soft whisper of change. Kyle joined him. The mission had changed. It was no longer observation, it was introduction. They didn't plan to land. Just orbit again, watch, maybe leave a message. But Earth had changed too. Human. Governments had united under a small task force for extraterrestrial contact. Not military, scientific, philosophical. Artists and thinkers sat at the table, not just generals. The humans had noticed the pulse, the silence, the mystery. They had not become angry. They had become patient. When Luma entered Earth's orbit again, they didn't cloak it. They let it be seen, and Earth responded. They didn't shoot. They didn't panic. Instead, they shone lights into the sky, entire cities turning on coordinated beams like candles held up during a concert. It was a welcome. Jarak stood at the viewing deck, eyes wet. "They waited for us," he whispered. Kale nodded. They never gave up. The two species had been dancing around each other through signals and silence. Now they stood on the edge of something new. Jarak wrote a message. It was short, in translated human language. "We hear you. We feel like you do. We will come in. Peace." And they sent it, not just through space, but through heart. In that moment, the old warning of the elders was broken forever. Not by war, not by conquest, but by curiosity. The humans didn't break the Valari. They opened them, and across both worlds, for the first time, the stars no longer felt lonely, because someone else was out there, not a monster, not a god, just a reflection, just another soul asking, "Do you feel like I do?" And the answer, finally, was yes. The stars were no longer just lights in the sky. They were bridges now, silent roads that connected two worlds that had once feared each other. On one side, Earth, bold and noisy, full of questions and music and dreams. On the other, Valari, ancient and cautious, rich with knowledge but afraid of feeling too much. The fifth and final part of this story began with a meeting. Not a war, not an invasion. A meeting that rewrote the future of both. The Valari ship Luma, small and graceful, like a silver feather in space, hovered just outside Earth's atmosphere. On board were Zarak and Kale, no longer commander and rebel, but equals. Carriers of a message, not weapons. The transmission they sent had echoed across the human world for days now. "We hear you. We feel like you do. We will come in peace." The world had stopped. Literally. Planes were grounded. World leaders froze their conflicts. People in remote villages and huge cities alike looked up into the sky, holding hands, waiting. It was not fear that filled the air, it was hope. And then Earth answered. A joint human message was sent from the International Space Station, using the same peaceful format. It was simple, yet powerful. We welcome you. We are not perfect, but we are trying. Please come see who we are. Kyle read the message aloud in the quiet of the ship. Jarak looked at him. Do we go down? Kyle smiled. They invited us. They shared their heart. How can we not? Still, landing was risky. Many Valari still believed that humans could not be trusted. Even now, far away in the Valari capital, the High Council was watching, ready to pull Luma back if anything went wrong. But Jarak had already made his choice. They didn't land in a city, not in a capital. They chose a place where the sky touched, the sea, an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It was neutral ground surrounded by water with scientists, artists, and historians waiting in peace. No weapons, just minds. As Luma descended, Earth's people watched in silence. The world felt like it was holding its breath. The ship touched down like a falling snowflake, smooth and soft. The hatch opened slowly, and the world changed forever. Jarak and Kale stepped out, not in armor but in soft robes of light gray woven silk. No weapons, no shields, just calm. The first person to greet them was not a general, not a scientist. It was a child, a young girl named Amina, barely 10 years old, who stepped forward with a flower in her hand. A white lily. She smiled. Welcome to Earth. Kale knelt down, took the flower with trembling hands and said, Thank you. You are the bravest among your people. Amina laughed. I'm not brave. I'm just not afraid of new friends. The humans clapped, not loud, soft, respectful. Many had tears in their eyes. What followed were days of conversation. Not secret meetings, not trade deals, just storytelling. The Valari shared their ancient songs, their star maps, their knowledge of dying suns, and living planets. The humans shared art, language, food, and mistakes. They admitted their wars, their pollution, their regrets. But they also showed their courage, their ability to rise again and again after falling. One night, Kale stood by the ocean looking at the moon above. A human linguist named Dr. Reyes joined him. You seem quiet, she said. Kale smiled. I used to think silence was the only way to survive, but Earth taught me that sometimes the most dangerous thing is not the noise, it's never being heard. Reyes nodded. And now? Kale looked out across the dark water. Now I think it's time we start listening to each other. Back in Valari space, however, tensions were rising. The High Council saw the news feeds, intercepted every human broadcast. Some were inspired, but others were angry. They accused Zarak of breaking the ancient law, of feeding a dangerous fire. The elders warned again, louder this time. The humans are clever. They smile, but they also build weapons. They love, but they also destroy. They are unstable. But for every elder who whispered fear, there were 10 young Valari who whispered wonder. One artist created a holographic sculpture called The Child, with the flower. It went viral. Another built a music symphony using both Valari harmonic chords and human jazz. People listened. They cried. Then came a moment no one expected. Earth offered something powerful. Not technology, not ships, but trust. Global vote passed. The United Nations announced the construction of the bridge, a joint space station where humans and Valari could live, study, and grow together. Not orbiting Earth, not orbiting Valari, but floating between, a place where no one species ruled. It, too, was a risky offer. But Zarak sent a message back to the Council. You taught us to watch, but you never taught us what to do when something reaches back. They reached. and we must respond not with silence but with truth. After long debate, the Valari agreed. The bridge was approved. Construction began. For 2 years, humans and Valari engineers worked side by side. The station bloomed like a flower in space. Its walls were lined with gardens. Its air mixed with scents from both worlds. It became a symbol, not of peace achieved, but peace attempted. The humans sent their best minds. The Valari sent their wisest hearts. Jarak and Kale were made ambassadors, not politicians, but storytellers. Their job was to remind everyone why this began. At the opening ceremony, broadcast live to both planets, Kale stood on a glass platform. Stars above him, earth below, he said, "We were told to fear you, but we heard your music and we saw your sky. You cried into the dark, not knowing if anyone was listening, and now we cry back not in sorrow but in unity." The crowd was silent. Then someone began to clap, then another, and another, until the whole station echoed with applause, not of victory but of shared hope. But not everyone clapped. There were still shadows. Small groups on both planets still spread fear. Some humans called the Valari invaders. Some Valari accused humans of being corrupt. But the bridge stood, not because everyone agreed, but because enough people believed in second chances, believed in reaching out instead of turning away. And then came the final sign that things had changed. A baby, born on the bridge. To a Valari scientist and a human medical researcher, a child of both worlds. Her skin glowed faintly like starlight. Her eyes were human-shaped but Valari-colored. She was named Elira, which meant the dawn between stars. She was not a symbol of peace. She was peace. Not perfect, but alive. Growing. A story still being written. And when Jarak, old and tired now, held her in his arms, he whispered, "The elders warned us, but they never saw you coming." In the end, the warning was not wrong. Humans were dangerous, but so were the Valari. All life is dangerous when driven by fear, but all life is also beautiful when led by love, by connection, by the courage to ask, what if they're not so different from us? So the story of Earth and Valari didn't end with fire. It began with a flower, with a child, with a question spoken into the stars, and an answer whispered back across the void. We feel like you do. And in that one sentence, two civilizations were never the same again.